last time Lotus launched an all-new sports car, Gordon Brown was Prime Minister, Apple had just launched the new iPhone, and Tesla was a startup still making cars out of Lotuses. Well, the Lotus they were launching then was the Evora. That was 14 years ago, and this is its replacement, the Lotus Emira. It's got some heavy lifting to do, this car as well, though, because it's not just the replacement for the Evora, but also the Exige and the Elise as well. And that's why you're going to get a choice of 4-cylinder engines, so 4-cylinder from Mercedes AMG, but also the V6, the 3.5 litre supercharged V6. So in terms of performance figures, this car's got 400 brake horsepower, 310 pound-foot of torque, and you get from 0 to 60 in 4.3 seconds and go 180 miles an hour flat out. Lotus has been a little bit vague about weight, and obviously weight is very, very important to Lotus. They're saying from 1,405 kilos. This is the V6, so clearly that's going to be slightly different. It's also got the manual, so where that ends up, I'm not sure. So manual would be lighter than the DCT transmission that's standard with a 4-cylinder. But let's call it somewhere in the mid 1400s, I would say. If we just accelerate, you can probably hear it's pretty loud. Now, it shouldn't really be this loud. So it's a tooling tryout, not perfectly representative of a production car. And when I was driving around just getting ready for this video, it started to make an awful lot more noise. I don't know if a valve stuck open somewhere in the exhaust, but you can probably hear it feels and sounds pretty raucous. So from behind the wheel then, you've got a nice low down driving position. I think it could go a little bit lower still, but it's still quite low. I'm quite happy here really. Feels quite a wide car. It's mid-engined obviously, so you've got a very low bonnet line as well. So because you've got these raised wheel arches, low bonnet, nice low driving position. Actually, I feel like I've got a very good view over the road, feel very connected to it. So yeah, I would like it to go a little bit lower, but generally I'm pretty happy here. The steering wheel is clearly a bit of an odd shape. It's got some very chunky spokes because of the multifunction controls here. So prefer those to be a bit thinner, maybe a more conventional shape, but the thickness of the rim is nice. Your thumb slot into it nice and easily. And also classic Lotus here, look, a handspan to the gear knob there as well. So that's not an accident, that's very, very intentionally done. And it's also inspired by the Esprit here, this interior is worth noting. The way these door cards raise up, so that places the gear shift quite handily for your right hand as well. The steering feel in this car is absolutely exceptional, as you'd expect of a Lotus, but I think it's better than the Evora. It is better than the Evora, and that's really unusual these days for a car to succeed another car and have better steering feel. A big part of that is because that's still an electro-hydraulic setup, so the pump's hydraulic, it's controlled electronically, but you still got that hydraulic kind of feel and that detail that you get with that. It's really, really nicely weighted, and it's very busy in your hands in terms of communicating, but it's not excessively noisy in terms of kickback and giving you too much sort of distortion from the surface. Now, we said we're on the stiffer chassis, the sport chassis. They are passive dampers as well, so you can't switch them between modes. There are different modes to switch between, but they don't affect the suspension at all. That's more about engine calibration. At low speed in villages and things, it can be a bit knobbly. Of course, you've got the softer tour setup if that's what you're doing more of the time. But for a typical B road at speed, you get some speed under the wheels and it settles down and it really starts to breathe with the road while being very, very controlled. Not a lot of body roll, very, very direct and responsive. And I think combined with that steering, it doesn't feel crazy fast at first, the steering, and it isn't crazy fast, but when you turn it in quickly, it really shoots in there and feels very, very responsive. So I didn't get on with the gearbox at first. It's a 6-speed manual. It's relatively light shift in some ways, but it's quite close across the gate. And also when you go to engage it and punch it home, it does need quite a direct movement to that final slot home. I felt like I was quite likely to miss shift at first, but I think just with acclimatization you get used to it, and also just encourages you to take a bit more of a physical approach with it. And when you do, it's actually quite a satisfying feeling, especially when you're blipping on the downshift like that. totally got used to it now, and it's just second nature. But there's definitely a feeling that you need that push home to really get it working. Now this engine is the 3.5 litre V6, supercharged V6, shared with Toyota, familiar from the Evora of course. There is a little bit of a hole in the power delivery low down, and it's not bonkers quick because it's 400 brake horsepower, 1400 or so kilos, but what it is more than fast enough. And once you get it out of that hole at the bottom of the rev range, it's once you get it out of that hole at the bottom of the rev range, get it to, like, I think it's about 4,100, it really kind of picks up, and the noise shifts as well. When it sounds like it should do, which it doesn't at the moment, it sounds a lot better. I did just misshift a little bit there, to be honest, so I'm still getting used to it. Now, of course, the key to this car as well is the handling, and this doesn't disappoint. This is an extremely enjoyable car to thread down a road like this, which is, after all, what it's made for. It's made for a brilliant British B road. So you turn it in, really nicely weighted steering, just a little bit of roll, but it's very nicely gathered up. Very prompt turn in as well. Good brakes. Let's just head up here as well. You see the balance on this car as well. So if we turn it in here, so it's got an awful lot of traction. So we've got more grip in terms of the Cup 2 tyres available. We're on the Goodyears, and you know the Goodyears are very, very sticky. Basically, when you go around regular corners, it's kind of a steady state, not understeer in terms of terrible waiting it out to turn, but there is certainly, you lean on the front and just wait a little bit. It's quite gradual, you know, it does the business, but it's not crazy rapid. But it's the corners, you can carry so much speed. The chassis works so well that, you know, it doesn't matter that it's not massively powerful. If you use the chassis and the grip and the brakes, it is pretty amazing. The balance is, you know, you feel like you're pushing a little bit on the front. It's not really frustrating understeer by any means, but it's definitely a kind of, you get to the limit and it nudges out a bit, especially in kind of something smaller like a roundabout or a corner where you can play with the weight distribution more, and you bring that mid-engine balance into play. But it's very sure-footed, little bit of understeer in steady state stuff, and just very grippy. It doesn't really want to showboat, and that's you know, I think the Evora, when that first came out, it was quite a sideways car. It's very tied down, quite a serious car for lap times, but also very enjoyable as well. So if you bring this car into a corner, very grippy, little bit of lean on the front there, little bit to the rear, but it's very sticky, very intuitive. It just wants to get gripping and get going again. It doesn't feel crazy rapid at first, but as you go into a corner and you need to put in some lock, suddenly you jab it in there and the whole car just moves as a piece. It's very together, there's no kind of slop and waiting for it to turn, it just fires into the corner. When you're going around steady state corners and leaning on it, it's definitely a feeling that when you push, it's going to push a little bit at the front, and it lets you know the limit's there, and you just lean on that. You can make it pivot, but that's more in things like, you know, a corner where you can play with the weight transfer a little bit more, so like a roundabout or a tighter corner. Something like this now, it's just going to hook up and power out. I think one thing with this chassis is that it just could deal with so much more power, and I don't think that's a negative comment on this car. I think it's very capable, and clearly they're going to dial it up over the years to come. But what it means is you can just lay into all this power, and really it's about carrying momentum, using the braking, using the balance of this car to extract all that performance. And when you do that, it all just hangs together very harmoniously indeed. Picks up, it's picking up, but now's the point when over 4,000 RPM, that's when it really starts to work. So the Emira is a great car to drive, really satisfying, especially over a B road. You got that steering, the ride, the grip, all that kind of just fusing into one. The problem for the Lotus is the competitive set, because this segment is absolutely bursting with talent.
better benchmarks than the Porsche Cayman. For a decade and a half, this has been the go-to coupe sports car, and with good reason. This car just does so many things so well. Now, the 718 range kicks off below £50,000, but that's with a flat 4 turbocharged engine. This car is the 4-litre GTS, and it's the engine the Cayman really deserves. It's the 4-litre naturally aspirated flat 6, a variant of the same engine used in the hardcore £80,000 Cayman GT4. And, well, just listen to this. Now, that engine puts the Cayman on a more even footing with the Emira. Firstly, in terms of performance, it's got the thick end of 400 horsepower, so this is a truly quick car. And also in terms of price. Now, the 4-litre GTS kicks off below £70,000, but with a few options, and Porsche knows how to charge for options, as we all know. This car's in the mid-70s, so very much on par with the first edition Emira. Now, there's something magical about the way the Cayman handles. It's got, in theory, less advanced suspension. It's a strut-based suspension setup, whereas the other cars are double wishbones, but this car is so confidence-inspiring. All those cliches about being at one with the car, feeling like the car's an extension of you, all that stuff, it really applies with the Cayman. I mean, heading around here, instant response, and you just have options all the time. You need to add a bit of lock mid-corner, no problem. You want to brake a bit later, it's always on your side, always willing you to just enjoy yourself. And I mean, there are very few cars that you feel quite so comfortable with straight away. The kind of getting to know you stage in driving a new car just isn't there in a Cayman. Within a couple of miles, you feel like you've been driving it all your life. This car has a manual gearbox. You can have the Cayman GTS with a PDK, so double clutch gearbox, pedals on the wheel, but this is a proper H-pattern manual gearbox. Has very long gearing, which to some people is a bit of a bugbear with the 718. But one of the upsides to that is you get a chance to really hear the engine sing as you ring it out. I mean, have a listen to this. That flat 6 soundtrack is a key part of this car's appeal, although the Emira is not too shabby in the soundtrack stakes either. Now, there's an auto blip function. You can hear these beautiful crisp down changes. I'm ashamed to say I'm not doing them myself. That's the auto blip function doing it. But you can change with this little drive switch control here, change the settings, and you can DIY heel and toe yourself if you like. And it's a beautiful setup on the pedals to do that. And such a user-friendly gearbox. You can change gear so smoothly, so quickly. And you always feel like the car's on your side. Again, there's that incredible user-friendliness and usability. That sense of usability, that user-friendliness, extends to everyday mundane stuff as well. First of all, your all-round visibility is incredibly easy to see out of. I mean, not only ahead and to the sides, but over the shoulder as well. That flat engine means you have a lot of glass behind you, and it's a really easy car to reverse and to park, which isn't always the case with mid-engine sports cars. If you were going to choose a car to drive into the middle of town, park on the streets, you'd be absolutely fine in a Cayman. The other advantage it has is that it's actually quite a practical car. It's got 2 boots, and the boot in the front is absolutely huge. It's really quite cavernous, and there's a decently usable boot in the back as well, plus a luggage shelf above that flat 6 engine. That's actually one kind of mark in its favour above the Emira in the usability stakes, because the Lotus doesn't actually have a boot at the front. That cab forward design means all that space is taken up by crash structure, by those clever aero ducts, sort of layered aero design, and by cooling. So you don't have the advantage of 2 boots in the Emira, just a reasonably sized boot at the back.
The Cayman isn't perfect, however. The driving position can be tricky to get comfortable in this manual car with its long clutch pedal. The aircon controls are fiddly, and you can't see them if the gear lever's in first or third. Plus, you have to pay more for proper climate control as an optional extra. The Cayman has some pretty vicious road noise too. Subjectively, the Lotus is a little bit quieter at a cruise. Perhaps the biggest criticism you could level at the Cayman, however, is a double-edged sword. It's such a good all-rounder that it's almost an obvious choice. Dare we say it's almost a bit boring. The Lotus has more of a sense of occasion and feels more exotic, while the Cayman feels more ordinary. But then, that's partly because it really does do so much so well. It's a difficult car to pick fault with.
Tell you what, this is pretty good, isn't it?
It is, isn't it? I spent a lot of time in this car already. I think it's great as well, but there is one thing that we're overlooking here. It's the Alpine A110S. Have you driven that before?
Not this one, no.
I haven't driven the S ever at all, so let me jump in the driver's seat, you get in the passenger seat, and we'll go and make a verdict after that.
Sounds like a plan.
Come on then.
Like the seats.
Well, hold on. What's this then? What are we driving? It's the A110S, so what does that mean?
So it's the Alpine A110 with a bit more of everything. A bit more power, a bit more torque, a bit more grip with wider tyres, and a bit more downforce as well. Because this particular car has an aero pack.
And hasn't this car been around for a while though, already?
Yeah, they've recently updated it. I mean, it's pretty subtle other than the wing on the back. They've updated the infotainment, that's a bit more slick. And they've also slightly changed the range. So there's now kind of 3 flavours of A110. You've got the base model, a whisker under 50 grand.
Okay, so it's a lot cheaper than the others as a base car.
Yeah, although this one is more or less £60,000. And with a few options, this car actually tops 70k.
So it is kind of the relevant car to having this test with Emira and the GTS Caymans.
I would say so. Yeah.
So in terms of suspension, then what's going on with the suspension?
They've really significantly stiffened it up over the regular A110. So the anti-roll bars are 100% stiffer.
Wow.
And the springs by 50%. So it's a significant increase.
But then the regular car always was very, very soft. So it sounds like a big increase, but in some ways,
that's true.
It's such a soft car that to make a difference, it's got to be dialed up quite a lot.
Like a classic car in some ways.
Yeah, it's still dialed up a lot. So the S has been around a little bit. Is it the same power output in this car as well now they've revised it?
It's had a little bit of a bump, so it's now up to 296 bhp, which is a big increase also over the regular car, which is around 250 or thereabouts. I mean, obviously,
and the old S was 288, I think.
That's right, yeah.
Something like that, so it's about a 20 brake horsepower increase as well.
Yeah, so it's, I mean, and you do feel it, I think, on the road. I mean, this, you know, it's not as rapid as the other two, but it's by no means slow. It definitely gets a move on.
Yeah. And we got this aero kit as well, that you said, and we got what tyres are on? Is it on grippier tyres as well?
This is actually on, Michelin Cup 2s, which are an option on this car. You pay an extra £600 or so for them, but I mean, I don't know if you can hear it through the microphone, but they're chucking out a fair bit of road noise in this car, but also a lot more grip. It also sits a bit lower than the normal car. It's a few mil lower too.
Yeah. A few mil lower,
4 mil.
4 mil lower.
If we're going to be exact. There we go. Let's be exact about this.
The original A110 was all about being light, which this car's still light. They're very light cars, aren't they? Is this much heavier particularly?
I think it's around 1140 kilos or thereabouts. So, I mean, it's nearly 300 kilograms lighter than the other two cars. It's a significant difference. Even
though it's down on power by about 100 brake horsepower, it's way down on weight. It's 300 kilos on weight, so that's going to redress that balance too.
It does feel light on its feet as well, I think, the way it gets down the roads.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing for me is that, you know, the original one was all about being quite soft and letting the car roll and kind of celebrating that almost, in terms of, rather than trying to clamp it down and make it grip, letting it be quite fluid. And that's what we all liked about it.
That's true.
In kind of dialing it up, they can only really dial it up. And does that take away some of the character of this car one day? You know, that's the question that I'm wondering as I get behind the wheel. I think
it's a valid one, because there's a strong case to argue as do we really need an A110S, because the regular car is about less is more, and it's about having that lovely fluid ride, and this one it's more hunkered down, it's more power.
It takes it out of that price point where it's so tempting, isn't it, and into that sort of higher echelon. So that's interesting.
Although on the other hand, you could argue that the extra body control, extra pace, it can compete on a more even footing with cars like the Porsche Cayman and today the Lotus Emira.
Fair point, So let's have a look at this 4-cylinder then. So angry sounding little thing, isn't it? Plenty of performance.
Bossy, isn't it? And just over my left shoulder, I can hear various kind of gasps and whooshes from the turbo.
Yeah.
I kind of hear the engine
I've
respiring.
got a sport button here as well. It seems like a good idea to give that a press. All the dials have done something slightly different.
Yeah.
We got pops and
pop and
crackles. Yeah, I'm not. Yeah.
If you hold that button down, you get race mode as well, which in true Renault Sport style means everything's switched off.
Right. Okay. Let's do that immediately then. Okay. Right. So second gear. Oh, is that louder or not? I don't know. It's still pop.
Yeah, I think it's probably about the same. And the upshift beep, classic Renault Sport. The nice thing is, they're real pops and bangs, aren't they? None of it's synthesized. It's it's a real car making real noises.
I really like the sound of it. I like the DCT gearbox. I think people might think it should have been a manual or whatever, but I like the kind of the promptness of these shifts as well.
I don't think the car's too much poorer for it.
No. The brake feel as well, and just as we're coming into this junction here, I think the brake feels really nice as well. Nice downshifts. It's definitely in terms of the engine. I think that's just a win-win, isn't it? Really. So just like in terms of the ride, obviously it's a lot stiffer, isn't it? And I think you can feel it's definitely more composed. It's definitely more planted, but there's a bit more agitation to it going on. You mentioned the road noise before. And just chucking it through some corners and stuff as well. I think you still have that kind of malleable handling balance to it, which I really like, and I think it's definitely under control, and it's got a lot of traction when you just accelerate out of a turn. But when you toss it in, it's still got, with the Cup 2s as well, it's got a really kind of gentle rotation and playfulness.
You've got time to react to stuff, don't you? And it's very consistent. It kind of does the same thing every time, which is always a good thing in a sports car.
But is it a case of less is more? And with that, you're losing that sort of fluidity to some of the handling, gaining that composure, but you've got this ride that it's definitely not as polished as a Lotus. What's the point of that? So there's definitely some pros and cons. Right, so I've had a good drive of this car now, but I'm intrigued to see what you think of it as well. So
I'm itching to have a go, so let's
swap seats, compare notes, and then we've got to make our verdict, haven't we?
Yeah, I'm a bit worried about that. It's 3 very good cars.
Okay. Oh, this is unfamiliar for me.
I'll try not to scare you too much. All right, let's drop this down a gear. Let's see. I think the throttle response is really impressive, actually. It may be even a shade more responsive than the Porsche, although that's pretty high benchmark to start with. And I do feel like there's an instant response just off the dead centre on the wheel. It's a very responsive little car, and the same on the brake feel. You mentioned the brakes. I think we're feeling that 300 kilogram shortfall in weight when we're hitting the brakes, just that extra layer of responsiveness.
And for me, the Lotus is the best steering in terms of feel and just everything. What do you think? How's the steering for you?
I think Lotus is still the gold standard for steering feel. I mean, one thing I would say for this car is the steering doesn't pull about much over bumps. So if you throw this car down a bumpy road, it tracks exactly true. Whereas in the Emira, you sometimes find yourself having to tighten your grip a little bit to keep the thing on a trajectory. But I think that's a price worth paying for that extra feel and extra kind of granular detail of the Lotus.
I really like the Lotus in terms of how supple it was as well on the road. It was a little bit niggly at lower speed, but once it gets some speed under its wheels, I think it settles down and it is nice.
Although, I mean, one nice thing about the A110S is the torque is spread a little bit more broadly across the whole rev range than it is in the normal car, and it is nice to have that kind of always-on feel. You can always dip into the torque reserves.
I think because in a lot of ways, we've seen Porsche get it wrong with the 4-cylinder with the 718, which is where the GTS kind of comes to the rescue. And people still say, manuals are better. And the thing is, it's a great advert for having a kind of energetic 4-cylinder with a DCT.
I mean, if you offered me the engine in this car or the flat 4 from the base 718, I would go for this engine every time.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, absolutely.
So we thought, contemplating the lithe Lotus, the precision Porsche, and the feisty little French car, until, after much prevarication, we were ready to prevaricate just a little bit more.
So a day driving 3 pretty stellar cars.
Incredible cars, yeah.
I don't really want to put one of them in third place, but we have to.
Yeah, you're looking that way, and I think we're both agreed that the Alpine is our third place car.
It is.
Very, very good. And I think the gains on the S in terms of performance, especially the engine and the gearbox working together like that, I found that really satisfying, but maybe the chassis is maybe a bit more of a mixed blessing.
Yeah, I think it's made the handling much more together, and definitely on a circuit, I think it works really well. But on the road, it's maybe lost some of that kind of lovely languid feel of the regular A110.
Yeah.
And although it's a bit more on par with these two, it still feels like it's just in a slightly different league to these two cars.
The ride as well, isn't it? When it's sort of steady state driving, sometimes it just feels like it's not doing the job as well as the Lotus.
Yes.
And it just pushes up into that price point, doesn't it? It's a little bit more awkward.
That one with options is over 70k, which is a lot of money for an A110, isn't it?
So great car, but decision is final, third place, which gives us
great.
Yeah, which gives us more of a dilemma, hasn't it, between these two?
I know. Yeah.
Lotus, Porsche, both brilliant cars. So I don't know. What do you
I've
think?
been kind of yo-yoing back and forth all day. I'm finding this one a really difficult one to call. So I was thinking maybe we count to 3 and we both say which one's our winner.
Go for it.
So 1, 2, 3. Lotus, Porsche, no Lotus.
I'm definitely on the Porsche. I think you've maybe been slightly more between the Lotus and the Porsche than I have. I've been as soon as I drove it, I leant towards it straight away. But then I sort of got absorbed in the Lotus more and sort of tapped into its strengths. And it is a brilliant, brilliant car. But I think for me, the Porsche is just almost like the kind of world champion that doesn't always finish first, but he's just consistent across. Sometimes it's in second place, but it's not far behind. The rest of the time, it's just hitting its marks first place. And it's just there's those areas that I think particularly powertrain, gearbox, and which is the heart of the driving experience. It really is as well.
And the handling too is pretty incredible, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know about you, but I just find this more kind of malleable, more kind of extrovert, mid-engine slightly. I don't know if it's a flat 6.
Maybe
just feels like in faster corners,
central.
It's more playful. Not that it's sliding, but you just feel it pivoting more in a way.
And you feel like you can sort of do anything with it. You're not. It's always on your side, isn't it?
Yeah. But this is brilliant, isn't it? I mean, clearly you've had a hard time deciding with this, and I love it as well. So what are the standouts for you then on the Lotus?
Yeah, I think in the pros column, I mean, it really has the presence of a supercar, I think. It feels like a £70,000 exotic car. Yeah. And we're in the middle of nowhere here, and yet 3 people have come to us.
Yeah, 3 people have bought them.
They've bought one,
So it shows they've hit the marks with this car, haven't they? They've really struck on something that appeals to people. It's good to see, and I think driving it backs that up. If I bought one of these, it's a fantastic car, isn't it?
I think it's the most exciting car of the 3 in terms of just the sort of rawness and the involvement, and the feel of the steering. The
steering feels amazing. It's definitely above the Evora, and better than anything here. Love the way the chassis breathes with the road.
But it's still a Lotus, isn't it?
Yeah, it's got that lovely blend, something that the Alpine doesn't quite do, of sort of breathing, but also when you turn it in, it's so sort of hunkered down, and it just zooms into the corners. There's no slack.
Yeah, it feels almost just like a racing car almost.
Gets in there, Yeah, it's a difficult call, isn't it? But I mean, the other things for me on the Cayman were, the practicality side of it.
It's so usable, isn't it?
So usable, which I know the Lotus has attempted to do more of that.
But the Cayman just has it licked slightly in every area, and that doesn't it? In terms of visibility, interior quality, massive boot at the front. The packaging means they couldn't put a front luggage space in the Lotus.
Yeah, and I think seating position for me as well, driving position, it's just a little bit lower down. I prefer that. I prefer the interior on it, and the amazing thing is that this car's pretty old now. Really,
it's been around a long time.
It's been around a long time. It's still doing the business, and for me, it still edges it here, and it's the car that I feel quite comfortable saying is the winner.
Yeah, I mean, I've tortured myself all day about this decision, but I do agree with you. I think the Porsche does win on points. I mean, let's not forget there's going to be another version of the Emira on the way with a 4-cylinder turbo
the 4-cylinder
AMG
one.
engine.
We've seen how well that can work in the Alpine with a 4-cylinder and the DCT. So
maybe a round 2 perhaps later in the year. But today, I think just on points, Porsche's just edged it.
It is our winner.
Indeed. Well, let us know what you think as well. Please let us know in the comments which of these would be your winner. And if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to Car for more.